is. Hello. So we usually just kind of wait a minute maybe and let some folks log on and see who is coming up.
Sounds good. Gives me just enough time to get uncomfortable with how big my ears look.
All right, so let's see. And I'll bring it up over here so you'll be able to see the comments coming up. And then
Nice. I'll try not to be distracted. Hey, look.
if you look over here, you're going to be weirded out. We're on a delay.
Oh, that's going to trip me up. All right, I'm not going to look at that.
Hey everybody, see y'all logging on. Miss Neely, how are you? Joanna, Katie, hey. We're gonna give it just a couple more minutes and get started. Thank you for the coffee, by the way.
You're very welcome. Cheers.
Salud.
Salud. We need as much caffeine as we can get. It's cool. You can see who's there.
Yep.
Nice.
Hey Quinn, what's up, Q? All right, let's get it kicking. Before I start, a couple of things I want to give a thanks to. A lot of people have reached out and asked about the new lids. So I want to take this time to actually throw that back. If you didn't notice, one of the things that I'm wearing today, this is a new hat that I just got made. It says "We" on it. The reason for that is a lot of times folks will message you, and I'm sure you get this too. I'm like, oh, I love the work you're doing in the community. And I always try to be intentional about saying, no, it's about we. Absolutely. It's about us as a village. That's the reason I'm doing that. So I've had a lot of people look and say, how can I get one of these hats? Well, hopefully I can make that happen for you. But I also want to work with somebody local that can get them printed for me at a reasonable price so I can keep it down. So if anybody's watching now live, if that's what you do, if you know somebody in the community that can help me print these hats, put me on to them. So we'll get into it. Today, I am here with Jed Dews, who is the Director of Pendleton Place, right here down the street from where I live on, guess it, Pendleton Street. So I'm going to let him talk in a minute about what he does, and we're going to talk a little bit about foster care and everything. Jed's going to let us know everything that's right, wrong, and indifferent with the foster care system and how we can fix it by the end of the week, hopefully.
Everything.
So, Jed, why don't you go ahead and kind of give us an elevator speech on what it is, what you do in Pendleton Place.
Yeah, absolutely. Really glad to know TJ in general and know his village.
You're part of it.
I am part of it. I'm proud to be part of it. There's so much that we do and accomplish together. I'm grateful for everything the school district's doing right now, everything that the social work department's doing right now. But we together with TJ, as part of our board of directors here at Pendleton Place, really respond to the needs in the community of children, youth, and families, no matter what that need looks like, and it takes a lot of different shapes. We've been known for a long time, since 1975, for our work in foster care. So we started in 75 as a child shelter, really an emergency shelter to meet the needs of kids coming into foster care who just needed the very basics of safety, permanency, a roof over their head, food to eat. And over the years, the 45 years since Pendleton Place was founded, we've grown, we've adapted, we've kept up with changes in child welfare, including the move away from emergency shelter to more long-term youth housing. So right now, as of 2020, you'll find Pendleton Place doing residential foster care work still. It's very much the heart of who we are. We have a 10-bed facility for teenage girls living in foster care. And it's very focused on independent living, and we're really proud of really that shift we've made to independent living, a focus on independent living, and really looking at the needs of youth who are exiting foster care or at risk of exiting foster care to independence. And so it's a very specialized group home. We also coordinate the assessment center, which is the assessment center is made up of folks from Prisma Healthcare, Department of Mental Health, the folks from our team, as well as Julie Valentine Center and lots of other folks that interface with children and families to make sure that children and families who enter foster care really get a wraparound approach to how they enter, and really more of a collaborative community hub. So very proud to say, if you don't know this, that we are the only county in the state of South Carolina that has this type of assessment center. It's really an initiative. It's a pilot that we've been using to try to show that if you bring everyone together under one roof, the entry into foster care can be a lot smoother, a lot more effective, and just a lot more beneficial for the children and for the families, which I think we can talk about later.
Yeah.
Some of the ways that you reduce trauma when you bring families, providers, kids together under one roof. And then we also have really ventured in recent years into youth homelessness services. So Pendleton Place has opened the Youth Resource Center, which is an amazing program.
It is.
I get super excited about it. The Youth Resource Center serves youth experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And we are, as an extension of that, also working to become Greenville County Safe Place Agency, so that we work with any commercial or transit sites who identify a child in need. We have an agency response set up for that. So it's my best. I can't shorten it anymore than that.
That's a lot, man. There's a lot going on here at Pendleton Place, and as Jed mentioned, I am on the board here, so I'm proud. For several years, Pendleton Place was one of the only two nonprofits that I financially gave to, and finally caved in, decided to serve on the board, and I'm loving it. And my heart beams when we talk about the programs, especially the Youth Resource Center, just because it's one of the newer. But I have so many friends that are a part of my circle and part of my life that are changing lives here every day. So I want to kind of back, we already got kind of halfway up into the clouds, but I want to start out, because I don't know who's going to be watching this video or to what level they may or may not serve. Let's talk about like what foster care actually is, and like how does a child even end up in foster care? Yeah,
it's a good question. It's good, I think, to back up to that higher level, because I think we talk a lot about my kid got removed, or someone I know's kid is suddenly in care. And nothing's ever sudden, and who did that removal I think sometimes gets confusing for the community and for the public at large. Really, there are only two ways for a child to enter foster care. That's done either through law enforcement or through a judge. DSS caseworkers are not going out and kind of randomly or with their own autonomy bringing children into foster care.
So you mean social workers aren't taking kids from their houses?
Absolutely not. No. Social workers are part of the investigations into alleged child maltreatment. Social workers are part of the process, of bringing kids into care. But the decision making is really at the law enforcement level or at the court level. Okay. And we use emergency protective custody orders through law enforcement to bring children into foster care when there's an immediate threat. We know that there's a safety issue. Right. Law enforcement makes that discretionary call. Otherwise, we are presenting that case to a judge, and that judge is making the decision, an ex parte order, to bring that child into foster care. Also, have to be careful, a disclaimer, because I say we a lot, but the truth is I am not part of DSS. Here at Pendleton Place, we are a private agency. Yeah. So we work very closely with the Department of Social Services, but we are not public employees.
Gotcha.
So as much as we interface, as much as I feel sometimes like the DSS, part of the DSS team, we're not DSS.
This may be a whole nother video that we could do. Tell me if you don't, because I'm already going off script. This may be something you're not comfortable talking about, but I think there's a lot of times, even within our field, there's a lot of confusion around. I work with a lot of people and have worked with a lot of people who are scared to make reports of abuse and neglect, even if they're a mandated reporter. Yeah. Can you talk about maybe how difficult it is for a child to even end up in that situation if somebody makes a report?
Yeah, the steps that lead to child maltreatment and what that child finds themselves in, it really can vary. I think one thing that I think a lot of us know, but maybe aren't as aware of, is how widespread neglect issues are. Mm-hmm. And, I think we tend to think of foster care in the extremes, and we tend to immediately, our brain goes to those really horrific stories of sexual abuse and physical abuse. Yeah. And they absolutely occur, but they are by far the minority of foster care cases. So most of the children, the majority of children who we are seeing in foster care are here because of neglect, a lot of substance use, exposure, a lot of families struggling with opioid addictions. That's really more of the reason why we find a child here. It's not about parents who are actively trying to hurt or maltreat their children. It's about families who themselves are in cycles of poverty, of addiction, which is, part of what continues to build for this child a really traumatic young life that then leads to foster care, which only really snowballs the trauma issues that we're talking about.
So this touches everybody.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah, I think we would all be, really, the numbers, we're in thousands, 4,000 plus children in foster care on an average day in South Carolina. It typically affects almost all of us to some degree or another. And if they're not in foster care, they may be at risk or identified at risk of foster care, which means they're engaged in some type of family preservation service so that we can prevent that foster care entry from ever happening.
What do you find are like some of the biggest misconceptions about the work you do?
Yeah, well, I think one you touched on, and I think we just talked about how children come into care is a big misconception. I always have to balance empathy with reminding folks of the reality, because I get why people get frustrated at folks like caseworkers. I think that there's a huge misconception about the life of a caseworker at DSS. People often like to blame those workers, maybe think that they are kind of doing a halfway job. The truth is the burden is incredibly high. And I think a lot of us do know this, especially if you're a social worker or you touch these systems, you know what that's like. I always like to defend them, at least advocate for them, because it is a major misconception. Most of them are just busting their tails every day, making sure that they keep their head above water.
They really are.
Yeah. And a lot of the source issues that cause them to bog down and to have delayed responses are being addressed in reform efforts, which we can touch on at some point.
All right, I'm gonna put a pin in it. Put it right here. So when we're thinking about somebody like a child who is currently in the foster care system, we talk a lot on this series about providing trauma-informed care, and that's basically acting in a way that, regardless if you've come from trauma or not, to make sure that we act in compassion in ways that's not going to re-traumatize and take care of the whole child. What are some things, when you think about that kind of work, best practices?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, all of us have to step back. We can't become desensitized to the work. It's really easy to do. We have to let ourselves feel, appropriately how rough it is every time we have a child in our care. It's really easy to start to lump them together, to start to gloss over the traumas that they've been through to get here. But one of the things we do with our staff is we keep stepping back to do two things. One, to remind ourselves that no child's ever asked to be in foster care.
Facts.
Every child that is here is a victim and a survivor and a champion in every case I've ever seen. And the second thing we really do is step back and we remind ourselves that foster care itself is a traumatic experience.
Yes.
And there's just no way around it.
Yes.
Even if we are all doing our jobs perfectly on the private and public sector side, this is a traumatic experience. And all we can do is minimize. So the best thing to do is avoid foster care altogether. Right? That's our best solution to combat that trauma. But when they do need an intervention, when they are here in our care, we just start working through the many steps to minimize some of that trauma that we see. And there are a lot of ways to do that. We train our staff and we talk a lot about what it is to go through foster care. I know you've shared before some of those videos, like Removed. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Fostering Great Ideas. They do a great life in limbo simulation to help folks experience that removal and placement in real time. But we have to put ourselves in those shoes. So one example I'll give is for a lot of the children that investigations gets involved in and then removed, it's just shock and chaos. It is surprise and no preparation. And then you compound that really with a lack of information. And so this child is constantly confused, constantly, being or telling themselves that this is happening to them. They have no agency in
Right.
the process. So, on the flip side of that, what can we always just have to ask the question, what can we do to better prepare the child?
Yes.
What can we do to better inform the child? And I say child, but most of them are in our cases, certainly, most of them are young adults or wise beyond their years based on necessity. They can handle more information than we think they can. And they deserve the truth. So making sure that they're equipped with that information, that they are told before anything happens. We don't do a great job in transitioning kids from placement to placement, preparing them for that process, and also giving foster parents the information. A lot of our experiences with group homes, but foster parents are left out of the information loop as well.
Yeah.
And so, they don't have that tool to start to equip those kids with knowledge, with a sense of awareness of what's happening in their own lives.
One of the things, there's like 500 things that you just mentioned I want to comment on. But when you talk about, two of the things I really heard kind of as themes throughout what you just said were consistent with things that we're stripped from or that are affected by trauma, and that's the ability to feel like we have power and control and we have agency, and providing consistency and giving voice and choice can really affect that. I was working with a teenager that was in foster care one time, and I'll never forget this statement because they were talking about it was actually an adult that came back to volunteer where they had been in foster care, right? So this is an adult volunteer that had themselves been through foster care. And they said, what I love about the program now is that these kids in the program now get to be teenagers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And how much it had changed since they had gone through, because some of the things they said, think about this, like if you're volunteering or even if you're a foster parent, I think these kids a lot of times get stuck in this weird place where they try to act like adults and they've had to live an adult life, so we think we want to treat them that way, but then also they've never got to be a kid.
Yeah.
And this person was sharing with me how the volunteers now would come in and it might not always be I want to teach you a lesson. It might just be I want to bake cookies with you. You know what I mean? Just let them be kids.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and this is true to any placement setting, out of home care placement, whether it's a foster parent or a group home, whatever it is. I hope that we are all leaving behind running those programs out of a place of fear and risk and liability. And that's what was happening to these kids is, they were coming into people's homes or congregate care settings, and we were so afraid, everyone was so afraid of making a mistake. But raising kids is about making plenty of mistakes, right? And letting kids make plenty of mistakes. And, one of my passions is tracking kind of child welfare reform and the policies there. And it has to be said that was a reform effort. The Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act of 2014, it had within it language that changed really federal regulations around normalcy and what we call now prudent parenting. And it allowed for the first time foster parents and leaders of congregate care settings to make decisions for these children that you would make for your own kids.
Gotcha.
As long as we do the work to make sure it's appropriate for that age, safe for this particular child, we suddenly had the power to make those decisions. It helped us start to move away from that fear-based decision making.
Okay.
And allow us to let them have normal teenage experiences. Not all places are there yet, even though it's been 5-6 years. But
so what are some of the normal teenage things that we might take for granted that typically a child going through the foster care system might be robbed of?
Yeah. For us, one of the number one things that really shocks us every time is how hardly any foster care child comes to us with prepared to drive. And that may seem so simple. We care for a lot of 15, 16, 17-year-olds, 18, 19, we go, all the way up to 21 for those that voluntarily stay in care. And, we get 19-year-olds in our facility who've never been behind the wheel of a car in their life. Their family experiences just didn't allow for it. It was either something that their family couldn't do for them or their previous foster placements couldn't do for them. So for us, it's a huge deal to have a driving program. It scares some other providers and foster parents, but letting them behind the wheels of our cars, insuring them, giving them options to get that permit, to get that license, and making sure that we have a vehicle. That we just purchased a new vehicle for the driving ed program thanks to some grant funding. Yeah, and it was just a priority, something like that. Because if you don't have a permit, you don't have a license, you just immediately have a strike against you.
Yeah.
Another example, dating. I mean, how many teenagers go on dates? I mean, most of them, I think. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of parents like, oh my God, right now, just thinking about that.
But those are decisions that we can't be afraid to make with these kids. They deserve the chance to go have an awkward date somewhere and learn, the do's and don'ts of dating, right? And if that means I need to meet, a random date potential, I'm happy to do that. And we just have to be confident to say, this is appropriate, this is safe, I'm going to let you have this experience, just like we would with any kid.
That's beautiful, man.
And there's plenty of examples. It's really at Smith House, our residential program, it really is our number one priority.
Shout out Hala.
Yeah, Hala Benafa, our licensed master social worker, who is over our residential services.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Before I kind of move on, I want to talk a little bit about aftercare. But is there anything else you want to talk about as far as like the best practices while a child is still in the foster care system before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that we all probably know intuitively, but have to remind ourselves of is the absolute need for therapy, for counseling. We can't understate it. Almost all of us could benefit, right, with some good counseling and mental health services. But for these kids in particular, one of the stories I hear a lot, and it's always hard to hear, is just how much self-guilt they carry. How much, even the strong ones and the tough ones, when the walls start to come down, how many of them cannot escape this blame that they have. They could have done something to not be removed. They are hurting their families by being in foster care. They're disrupting, all of these things. And they own that, in addition to a lot of other kind of typical thought patterns for foster care. It's disturbing. And so,
wow.
What happens in a lot of situations is we kind of set up this routine surface level monthly counseling session. And it needs to be more. Okay. Right? We need more therapy, more counseling. And Hal and her team here have done a great job with that. But we need folks that understand trauma really well to be those counseling, experts and to work with our kids. So yes, more therapy.
If we have any licensed clinicians working, are you hiring?
I know that Hal and her team are always looking particularly for therapists who would be willing with Medicaid kids. Yeah, let us know.
So, all right, let's shift into aftercare. After a child is exiting the foster care system, and hopefully, typically a lot of educators watch this, a lot of parents. What are things that we need to know about making sure, you talked about transitions earlier, making sure we provide the best aftercare?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, care enough to keep track of them. And that can be hard. I don't say that flippantly because it can be hard to keep track of them. But, when a young person transitions from one placement to another, give them something. Let them hold on to something that they can loop back around to. One of the great things for us now is with the Youth Resource Center, we have this way of saying, even while they're here, hey, get familiar, get comfortable with this place, because this is always going to be here for you. No matter where you go, no matter who you stay with, you got a number that you can call if things go poorly, or if you just need some assistance. It is really relevant that and sad that part of why we had to open these homelessness services for young people specifically is the number of them who are exiting our systems. And there are statistics everywhere around this, but it is very scary how many youth leaving foster care, leaving juvenile justice, will end up life on the streets, or doubled up with people who are really taking advantage of them. So if we don't do good aftercare, all we do is feed the youth homelessness problem that we have. And so the best way for us to get ahead of that is to reach out regularly to these young people, even if they're tired of hearing from us, continuing, because most people in their lives haven't been consistent. and haven't cared enough to reach out and bug them. And if we do that enough, they'll remember that we're here. So a lot of what we do is just consistency.
Yeah. And shout out to Josh and Ethan and everybody else involved with the Youth Resource Center. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I encourage you. I'm putting you on the spot. Come over to Pendleton Place and ask for a tour of the youth. Can you want to give a quick plug on like what, because they may not know what the Resource Center is, and we'll get back on topic.
Yeah, check it out for sure. We are always happy to give tours. And yeah, Josh Crocker and the team down there are doing an incredible job. We repurposed an entire on campus to be dedicated for this population. We brought the gates down so that it's accessible to our community for that building. And it runs a number of services. It has drop-in services 3 days a week. Right now they're on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And any youth experiencing homelessness, and honestly, we're not asking any questions. So really any youth in crisis should come and just walk in, talk to someone, and know that it's low barrier. We're not interested in what their current challenges are. We're not looking for them to be whole and stable, because why would they be there? That's not the point. The Youth Resource Center can provide showers, laundry services, access to computers, food, an array of needs that are just really basic needs. Let's just take care of what is the most pressing thing. At the same time, build trust, build relationship with these youth who have good reasons not to trust, and hopefully then move into case management. We actually have a really great rapid rehousing program. We have a pot of money that we would love to use to house youth in apartments that are in their name. Provides a great step-down process, and yeah, really cool things. Tours for that program, we can connect you through TJ. It's Josh Crocker has a email address on our website as the director of our Youth Resource Center, and Josh, I'm putting you on the spot, but he'll handle those as well. So,
is there a phone number that somebody could call?
Right now, because of all that's going on with coronavirus, if you call, you won't get a person.
Gotcha.
864-467-3650. But it will route you through if you follow the prompts to the Youth Resource.
Yeah, and clearly we're going to set those tours up for on the other side of the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, not this week.
All right, so let's take a shift into where you typically live in your world, and that's policy. Let me just open it up. Let's talk about foster care policy and what's going on in the state and in the federal government and what we need to know.
Yeah, so I think what I encourage people to do right now with policy and child welfare in particular is to celebrate, because
you don't hear that too often.
I know, right? But the truth is, reform is a huge ship. It takes a long time to turn. It's difficult. It's bureaucratic, and you have to find the right kind of points to celebrate. And we really are in a place where we should be happy. Anyone who's not familiar with the Families First Prevention Services Act should go look it up.
Say that again.
The Families First Prevention Services Act.
Okay.
It was actually approved as part of the Budget Act of 2018, so they kind of slipped it into the budget legislation. But it is dominating, and if you work anywhere near this child welfare, you're probably sick of hearing about Families First. But it is huge. It is the biggest reform in child welfare since Social Security Act or earlier. It's going to change the way that we can use federal dollars to take care of families, right? And I think we just talked about the best way to prevent trauma is prevent foster care entry.
Yeah.
Well, families that we know just need some help. Right now, it's very hard to provide those services. And particularly if you work at DSS, it's hard to provide those services. Families First really opens up a lot of funding for prevention. So we are right now at the state level writing prevention plans. We are detailing how we're going to use Families First dollars and what kinds of evidence-based family preventions we can bring into our state. That planning is going really well. It's slow, yes, because it's a state issue. Yeah. But it's happening. And
that is great.
There's a lot to celebrate there.
So we're moving in the right direction.
We are. And what I would encourage everyone to do, if that isn't interesting to you, first of all, God bless you if that's interesting to you. But On South Carolina Department of Social Services website, they are being a lot more transparent than they used to be. They have a number of documents that you can download or access on their website related to Families First, and they're doing a great job. Shout out to anyone working in our state administration for DSS or in the Greenville County, any of they are doing really good work, and it's exciting, and it's happening quickly.
I love it, man.
Yeah, it's compounded by, if I can throw another thing out, it's compounded by the fact that we are still navigating a huge class action lawsuit settlement, right? The Michelle H. lawsuit. Again, you need, if you're interested in child welfare, look it up. The DSS website has all of the plans for how they're responding to this settlement agreement. The settlement agreement is a reform leverage catalyst. We have new healthcare plans for our children in care. We have new visitation plans for our children in care. And they're all really good things. I could go on and on, but they're all really good things. And just very, very proud to see our state going in that direction.
So everybody, I've got like 2 more questions for Jed, but we have time. So if you have any specific questions on the foster care system, on, about being a foster parent, throw them in the comments now, because if they're not there, when we get done, we're done. I'm gonna shift this back. I'm gonna change gears again.
Okay.
If there is somebody that ends up watching this video that has ever had or is currently having thoughts or considerations of maybe I want to become a foster parent, what do they need to know?
Well, they need to, they need to know that we need them. First and foremost, we need you. We need hundreds and hundreds of more foster parents if we're going to meet the demand. We're moving away from the use of group care, and that's, when you ask, controversial, but I think for most of it's a good thing. There are a lot of kids who don't have any clear reason to be in a group setting. They would thrive better in a family-like setting. So as we already have this huge need for foster parents in South Carolina, as we reduce our dependence on group care, we're going to need even more.
Yeah.
I don't think you can stress enough how critically we need you if you're considering being a foster parent. I would tell them to find the best licensing agency for them. If you want to go through DSS, I think they've got good folks licensing at DSS, and I would encourage it. But there are a lot of others still doing licensing for foster families. You can check out Miracle Hill. Fostering Great Ideas has a really great licensing program, and am really impressed by all the work that they're doing with even non-traditional, quote unquote non-traditional type foster families. There's a place for you if you're interested in it.
And I'd like to add too, because I get a lot of calls from parents sometimes within Greenville County Schools, sometimes without or outside of, that are fostering, and especially usually it's very parents that are new to the foster care system. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't watched the video, I posted it over the weekend. It's called Removed. Check it out on YouTube, because Jed you mentioned it earlier. A lot of times the kids that end up going through this system, they're used to adults, and specifically adults that are supposed to be in charge of their protection and safety, letting them down. Yeah. Right? It's just, that's probably 100% really correlated with children that are going through foster care. And a lot of times I think parents will take behaviors personally that have nothing to do with them. And I guess, it's easy to, if you've taken someone into your home and they're lashing out but sometimes you would rather live in chaos that versus take a chance with something that's consistent that you don't. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm going to hurt you before you have a chance to hurt me, right? That kind of thing. And I'm sure you see that even here. And I would just encourage you, if that happens to you, if that's something that you're experiencing, reach out, maybe there's foster care parent support groups. There's people in the community that you can talk to. Let's pull it apart. And if there's any way possible, don't give up on that child and become just another cog in their line of inconsistent caregivers. Would you? I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And I think in your work, probably one of the things you do a lot is help people connect trauma to trauma behaviors.
Yes.
And that's something you need to look at if you're thinking about caring for a child that has been traumatized. All those all those things that we perceive one way, but there is an underlying trauma reason. I hear all the time, particularly with our teenagers, this kid is just self-sabotaging. They are convinced that they are going to sabotage themselves. They're not giving themselves a chance to thrive. And you just have to step back and think about how can you reframe that? I mean, they're not self-sabotaging; they're protecting.
Let me do
themselves.
that for you.
You know
this is how you reframe it, because I'm a combat vet, and a lot of times I'll use that in and say we don't own PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the rates of PTSD are much higher in survivors of sexual assault, foster care, et cetera, et cetera. It's very easy for somebody. Take the movie American Sniper. If you don't know a combat vet, if you're not a veteran, you've probably seen that movie. And there's a scene in that movie where Bradley Cooper, who has already been through several combat deployments, he's driving and he has a trauma reaction, and all of a sudden his driving is all over the road, right? Mm. He is exhibiting a survival technique that has kept him safe of conditions. Mm-hmm. But now when that same technique is used in our typical societal expectations, we see it as sabotaging or maladaptive. No, it's a survival technique. So it's not our job to just say you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's our job to kind of help with compassion, help that person learn a new skill.
Absolutely. And someone like TJ or anyone that knows trauma-informed care really well can equip foster parents and caregivers with alternatives, for how to react to those things. Because one of the things that we have found is it doesn't take as much as you'd think, to break through that. A lot of times just validation. As soon as someone, when this behavior is happening, that I think our resident team's great at is they will say, I just want to give you credit for how well you are surviving. I see what you're doing, and man, that's going to be valuable later in life when you have to, call on that as a resource. It just takes them off guard, right? I mean, it immediately starts to break through, I think, to what they need underneath, which is just validation. Yep. Just validation for what they're feeling.
What's your favorite thing about working in this field?
It is absolutely those moments when you can see the cycle start to come apart. That cycle between generations that may have been going on for 5, 6, 7 generations starts to slowly come apart, and you see someone accept and claim, breaking away from that. Lots of things, but yeah, those are really the moments that mean the most, and I'm really, really honored every time I get to see those. We see them at Smith House, we see them at the Youth Resource Center, we see them all over the place, and yeah, they're really cool. I wish I could. I can't name names of the girls, some of the girls we currently have, although a couple of them have given permission, and you can check out our newsletter, some other things that give permission for some of their stories to be shared, but they have made that decision, and they're doing it. It's really a great feeling.
When you describe that, the look on my face is two things. One, it's students that I can picture in my face. But second, shout out to Mom Dukes. I'll be interviewing my mom on Mother's Day to talk about making a decision to end cycles of generational trauma. That's gonna be a tough one for me.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a good one.
Very cool.
Any other final thoughts? The floor is yours, my friend.
If anybody has hand sanitizer you want to give us, the struggle is real. I know it is for everybody, but we have 10 kids and more, so.
And you're not kidding.
I'm not kidding. We have a lot of good resources, but just like everyone else, we are running out of toilet paper and hand sanitizer around here. So if anyone hoarded a few extra, we'd be happy to take them. But yeah.
So all jokes aside, if somebody's watching and they want to bring some
absolutely.
supplies during all this quarantine, can they just bring it?
Yeah, they can. We'll try to have someone here during normal business hours every day. We are running a reduced staff, like most people. But yeah, you should be able to just drop it off.
Could they check your website if you're going to be? Will it be put up if you're going to close your Facebook page?
Yeah, we'll share announcements as things go. I mean, right now the plan is to have at least one person in the building every day, so we'll be able to take those deliveries.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. All right. Man, Jed, I appreciate it. Thank you for everybody that's watching. And if you're watching after the fact, please check out Pendleton Place's website. We're doing great work here, and if you ever want to come for a tour or make a donation, we would love to have you for either one of those. Thank you again, and stay safe out there.
Thank you, guys.